Imagine yourself standing in the gray dawn of a Napoleonic battlefield when the ground shakes with the thunder of hooves. The sound itself is terrifying enough, but in the hands of the charging dragoons you see this weapon, the pattern 1796 Light Cavalry Saber. You hear the call for bayonets before the blade descends upon you. Such was the fate of many French soldiers. This curved steel blade became the trademark of Britain's light dragoons and hussars, cutting a brutal swath through Napoleon's armies. Contemporary observers described it as one of the finest cutting swords of its time, a weapon so effective and feared that it set a new standard for cavalry swords around the world. Today on The Knife Life, we delve into the story of the 1796 saber, exploring its design, its Eastern heritage, and the bloody legacy it earned on campaign. The pattern 1796 Light Cavalry Saber is immediately recognizable by its elegant yet menacing shape. It features a wide, single-edged curved blade about 32.5 to 33 inches long, roughly 83 to 84 centimeters, with a broad fuller, or groove, running along each side. Unlike many earlier European swords, the blade of this saber widened near the tip, forming a subtle flare called a yeoman that added weight towards the end of the blade as a means of increasing cutting power. The back of the yeoman is also sharpened, allowing for cuts with the back edge. The hilt is a simple stirrup-style guard, a single iron knuckle bow with a minimalist crossguard and a grooved leather-wrapped grip. This plain, functional hilt helped keep the blade light compared to the more complex guards of the era and kept it down to a weight of about 2 pounds or 0.9 kilograms. While the blade was front-heavy by design, it could be swiftly maneuvered by cavalrymen in the chaos of battle. 1796 was created for sheer cutting efficiency. Its deep curvature made slashing from horseback more effective, as the blade could draw through a target rather than simply chop. This played to the natural strengths and weakness of human reflex. In the frenzy of a melee, soldiers trained to favor thrusting with the point often reverted to gross motor skills with hacking strokes, which the curved 1796 saber excelled at. However, the 1796 was still able to thrust, although not as well as its straighter and thinner contemporaries. In addition to cutting down weight on the campaign trail, the simplicity of the design also allowed for easier manufacturing. The pattern 1796's design was cutting edge in a very literal sense, combining brutal physics with battlefield practicality to produce a weapon that was lighter and deadlier than its predecessors. To understand how the 1796 saber came to be, we must step back to the late 18th century. The British Army's cavalry in the 1780s and early 1790s was armed with older pattern swords, notably the 1788 patterns, that left much to be desired. These earlier swords, a straight-bladed heavy cavalry sword about 38 inches long and a slightly curved light cavalry saber up to 41 inches long, were unwieldy, overlong, and poorly balanced, often proving clumsy in combat. Part of this problem lay in that the standard 1788 patterns weren't particularly standard and varied from blade to blade. In the campaigns of the French Revolutionary Wars, the 1788 patterns left something to be desired in their performance. In fact, the entire British cavalry was found to be underperforming. In the Lowlands campaign of the War of the First Coalition, a young cavalry officer named John Gaspard Le Marchant saw firsthand the deficiencies of the cavalry's training and equipment. Le Marchant, then a brigade major with the 2nd Dragoon Guards, observed that his troopers lacked proper swordsmanship training and that they and their kit weren't prepared for the field. Determined to reform British cavalry, one of his first tasks was to design a better weapon for the job. Le Marchant drew inspiration from beyond Britain's shores. He was impressed by the cutting power of the curved sabers used by Central and Eastern European hussars, light cavalry from Hungary and Poland, as well as the blades of Ottoman and Mameluke horsemen he had studied. As he is said to have remarked, the blades of the Turks, Mamelukes, Moors, and Hungarians were preferable to any other. Held up in comparison, the influences of the Polish saber and the shamshir are fairly evident. In collaboration with a skilled Birmingham swordsmith, Henry Osborne, Le Marchant designed a new saber that embraced the Eastern saber profiles. The British Army adopted this design in 1796, issuing it as the regulation sword for light cavalry, thus the name Pattern 1796 Light Cavalry Saber. Le Marchant had actually intended for all cavalry, heavy and light, to adopt his curved saber, but the Army's Board of General Officers disagreed. The Army Board decided that a straight blade be kept for the heavy cavalry, such as regiments of Life Guards and Dragoon Guards, instead. And in some ways, this made sense, as heavy cavalry was expected to clash with other heavy cavalry, often wearing armor, which the thrust was more effective against. Light cavalry was predominantly meant for screening, harassment, and reconnaissance, and therefore was more likely to be fighting unarmored enemies, which cuts were quite suitable for. Thus, only the light cavalry got to brandish Le Marchant's new weapon, while the heavy cavalry received a different 1796 pattern sword. Despite this decision, Le Marchant's saber proved its worth as soon as it reached the hands of British light cavalry troopers. It wasn't just a new piece of gear, it was one of the opening strokes of Le Marchant's modernization of British cavalry. Alongside the weapon, Le Marchant helped develop improved cavalry training and drill manuals, teaching troopers how to properly fence from horseback and improving cavalry operations across the board. With a combination of better training and a superior saber, Britain's light cavalry was poised to make a dramatic impact on the battlefields of the Napoleonic Wars. Before we move further, my question for you this video is, do you believe that the 1796 Light Cavalry Saber should have been issued to the heavy cavalry, and if so, why? Let me know in the comments below. Once introduced, the Pattern 1796 Light Cavalry Saber swiftly earned a fierce reputation in combat. British light cavalry wielded this saber throughout the Napoleonic Wars, from the fields of the Iberian Peninsula to the final defeat of Napoleon at Waterloo. In skilled hands, the 1796 saber was terrifyingly effective. Cavalry charges that connected with unprepared enemy formations often had shockingly bloody results. Accounts from the Peninsular War describe British light cavalry, saber arms extended, slicing through French infantry lines in pursuit and wreaking havoc among fleeing troops. One British cavalry officer, writing of later colonial wars, noted the horrendous wounds the 1796 saber could inflict, including tails of limbs and even heads cleanly being severed by its blows. Such gruesome effectiveness underscored the saber's principal purpose: to incapacitate the enemy as decisively as possible. It's no wonder that stories, some most likely apocryphal, spread of French officers complaining that the weapon was inhumane. That did little to dissuade the British from its use. Throughout the Peninsular War, British light cavalry repeatedly proved their mettle. In clashes like the Battle of Salamanica in 1812, their swift saber charges against disordered French troops helped rout the enemy's flanks. In one notable engagement earlier in the wars, the King's German Legion, a British Allied cavalry contingent composed of German volunteers, also carried the 1796 sabers and used them to great effect against French columns, showing that it was only British-born troopers who benefited from the blade. Allied cavalry in the Portuguese and Spanish armies were likewise equipped with British 1796 sabers in many cases, further extending the weapon's reach on the battlefield. The saber's bloody success did have consequences that went beyond immediate battles. For instance, after Britain's wars with Napoleon, surplus 1796 sabers found their way into colonial conflicts. Many were shipped to India, where they saw action in the hands of British cavalry and their local allies. Records show that the 1796 had a long service life in India, remaining into use well after it was officially retired in Europe, even as late as the Indian Rebellion of 1857. Some blades that found their way into the East would even have their grips replaced and converted into talwars. The 1796 Light Cavalry Saber did not disappear with the end of the Napoleonic Wars. Far from it. Its legacy can be seen in cavalry swords around the world in the 19th century. In fact, one contemporary British officer remembered the 1796 pattern as the finest cutting sword ever manufactured in quantity, a reputation that encouraged many others to copy its design. Perhaps the most direct adopters were Britain's former allies and enemies in Europe. Prussia, impressed by the effectiveness of Britain's light cavalry, adopted an almost identical saber for their own use. the Prussian model 1811, commonly nicknamed the Blücher saber, after General Gebhard von Blücher, who led Prussian cavalry at Waterloo. This German version of the 1796 pattern was so similar that British and Prussian swordsmen could scarcely tell them apart, and it remained a standard in various German cavalry units for decades. In fact, some Imperial German cavalry were reportedly still carrying swords of essentially the same pattern even into the early 20th century during World War I, a testament to how well regarded the old 1796 was. The influence didn't end there. Several other European powers, such as Portugal and Spain, used British-made 1796 sabers to equip their light cavalry, especially during the Napoleonic Wars when Britain supplied its allies. Across the Atlantic, the American cavalry also took note. There is a saying that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, and in this case, the United States adopted cavalry sabers in the 19th century that were directly influenced by the British 1796 model. Collectors and historians today still praise the 1796 Light Cavalry Saber as a masterpiece of sword design, brittle, efficient, and influential. It's no exaggeration to say that this sword shaped the course of cavalry armaments for generations. While the days of cavalry charges are long past, the legacy of the 1796 Light Cavalry Saber rides on. For history enthusiasts and sword collectors, holding an original 1796 saber is a rare privilege, while holding a high-quality replica can be the next best thing. Atlantic Cutlery was kind enough to provide me this reproduction of the British pattern 1796 Light Cavalry Saber. This replica is not a wall hanger, it's made from 1080 high-carbon steel and ready to cut. This is probably the best reproduction blade I've actually encountered, and they absolutely nailed the distal taper of the blade. You watched the entire video, we both know you want one. Go check them out. As always, let me know in the comments what blades you want to see in future videos, and go watch another knife video. I'm sure I've got at least one other video that you'll enjoy. Until next time, stay safe and keep living the knife life.